The alarm bell rang through the training ship ISS Horizon. Cadet 13 stood in the middle of the combat room with broken equipment scattered around his feet. 3 small blue aliens from Centauri Prime cowered behind overturned tables. Their large eyes showed pure terror as they looked at the 7-foot-tall creature looming over them. Cadet 13 belonged to the Zephyrian race. His body looked like it was made for war. Hard shell-like skin covered his arms and chest like natural armor. Sharp claws extended from his fingers. 2 blade-like pieces stuck out from his lower jaw like knives. When he moved, his joints clicked and scraped together, making an awful sound. "You are all weak," 13 said in his rough voice. The translator device on his collar turned his alien words into standard galactic speech. "This training is for babies. I could crush all of you without trying." One of the Centauri cadets tried to stand up. His name was Pip, and he was barely 4 feet tall. His blue skin had turned almost white with fear. "Please, Cadet 13, we were just following the training rules. We did not mean to." 13 moved fast for something so big. His clawed hand grabbed Pip by the front of his uniform and lifted him off the ground. "Rules are for the weak. In real battle, there are no rules." He shook the small alien like a toy. "Maybe I should teach you what real fighting looks like." The other Centauri cadets pressed themselves against the wall. They made small crying sounds in their own language. Their blue skin had turned completely pale. From the observation deck above, Commander Jake Morrison watched everything happen. He was a human officer in charge of the Mixed Species Training Program. His brown hair was cut short in military style. His uniform had many medals from years of service. But right now his face showed deep worry as he watched 13 terrorize the smaller cadets. "Sir, should we stop this?" asked Lieutenant Amy Collins. She stood next to Morrison with her hand near the emergency alarm. Her red hair was pulled back, tight, and her green eyes showed anger at what they were seeing. Morrison's jaw was tight as he watched 13 drop Pip to the floor. The small Centauri hit hard and rolled away quickly. "Not yet. The other species need to learn how to handle bullies. Like 13, but stay ready." 13 laughed as the 3 Centauri cadets ran toward the exit. It was not a pleasant sound. It reminded Morrison of metal scraping against stone. "Run away, little ones. Tell everyone what happens when you face a real warrior." The door opened and the Centauri cadets rushed out. But 13 was not done causing trouble. He turned to the broken training equipment and started stomping on it with his heavy feet. Each stomp made loud crashing sounds that echoed through the room. "This equipment is garbage anyway," 13 said to himself. "Made for soft species who never had to fight for anything." He picked up a training sword and bent it in half with his bare hands. The metal groaned and snapped. Other cadets from different species walked by the combat room. When they saw 13 inside, they quickly moved to the other side of the hallway. Word had spread fast through the ship about the dangerous Zephyrian cadet. The crystalline vortex, who looked like walking diamonds, made tiny ringing sounds when they were scared. Whenever they saw 13, their bodies would dim and they would try to become invisible. The gaseous nebulons would change colors rapidly when frightened. Around 13, they stayed a constant gray color that meant extreme fear. Even the reptilian Drakmars, who were natural predators themselves, avoided areas where 13 might be. Morrison had seen enough. He pressed the communication button on his control panel. "Cadet 13, report to the observation deck immediately." Looked up at the darkened windows. Above, he could not see Morrison clearly, but he knew someone was watching. "On my way, Commander," he said, but his voice carried no respect. If anything, he sounded bored. A few minutes later, 13 entered the observation deck. The ceiling was barely high enough for his full height. He had to duck slightly to avoid hitting his head. Morrison and Collins were waiting for him. "Explain what happened in the combat room," Morrison said. His voice was calm but firm. Shrugged his massive shoulders. The Centauri cadets were too slow. They would not last 5 minutes in real combat. I was teaching them an important lesson. "By destroying equipment and threatening other cadets?" Collins asked. Her voice was sharp with anger. Turned to look at her. His alien eyes were like black stones. "Lieutenant Collins, your species is also very soft. You worry too much about feelings and not enough about strength. In my world, the strong lead and the weak follow. It is the natural way. Morrison stepped between 13 and Collins. This is not your world, Cadet. This is a training ship for all species in the Galactic Alliance. Every cadet here deserves respect and fair treatment. Respect must be earned, 13 said. He clicked his mandibles together in what Morrison had learned was a sign of dismissal. I have earned mine through strength. What have they earned through weakness? The communication system buzzed. Commander Morrison to Medical Bay immediately. We have injured cadets. Morrison's face went red with anger. What injured cadets? 3 Centauri with minor injuries and 1 Vortac with possible broken bones. They say Cadet 13 was involved. Made that scraping laugh again. The Vortac got in my way during weapons training. I barely touched him. Not my fault their bones are so fragile. Collins moved toward her emergency alarm, but Morrison held up his hand to stop her. He stared hard at 13 for a long moment. You are confined to quarters for the rest of the day. Report to my office tomorrow morning. Yes, Commander, 13 said, but again his voice held no real respect. He turned and walked toward the door. As he left, he had to duck down to fit through the opening. His heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. When 13 was gone, Collins turned to Morrison. Sir, this cannot continue. The other species are talking about leaving the program. Some are afraid to come out of their quarters. Morrison nodded slowly. He looked tired. I know, Amy. But we cannot just kick him out. The Zephyrian government specifically requested that 13 be trained here. If we send him home, it could damage relations with their entire species. Then what do we do? Morrison looked out the window at the stars beyond. I am going to contact Earth Command. Maybe they have some ideas we have not tried yet. Collins looked worried. You think Earth Command can help with something like this? I hope so, Morrison said quietly. Because if they cannot, this whole program might fall apart, and 13 will have won. In his quarters, 13 was already planning his next move. Tomorrow he would show the weak aliens even more clearly who was in charge on this ship. 3 weeks had passed since the incident in the combat room. Things on the ISS horizon had gotten much worse. Cadet 13 seemed to enjoy causing more trouble each day. The medical bay was treating new victims almost daily. Dr. Karen Bell was getting tired of patching up injured cadets. She was the ship's chief medical officer, a small woman with gray hair and gentle hands. But today her face showed deep frustration as she treated another Vortac cadet. This is the 3rd one this week, she told Commander Morrison over the communication system. The Vortac's crystalline structure is cracked in 4 places. It will take weeks to heal properly. Morrison closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. He was in his office reviewing incident reports. The stack of papers on his desk seemed to grow every day. What did 13 do this time? The Vortac says 13 threw him against the wall during hand-to-hand combat training. Called it an accident, of course, but the impact pattern shows deliberate force. Any witnesses? 12 other cadets, but they are all too scared to give statements. They just keep saying it happened too fast to see clearly. Morrison knew they were lying. Everyone was afraid of 13 now. The big Zephyrian had created an atmosphere of fear throughout the ship. Cadets would change direction in hallways to avoid him. The dining hall would go quiet whenever he entered. The door to Morrison's office opened. Lieutenant Collins walked in with another report in her hands. Her usual neat appearance looked stressed. Her uniform was wrinkled and her red hair was messy. More bad news, sir. Ambassador Crix from the Centauri delegation is demanding a meeting. 13 insulted him during yesterday's diplomatic training session. Morrison felt his stomach drop. The diplomatic training was supposed to be the safest class on the ship. It was all about talking and peaceful problem solving. What exactly did 13 say? Collins read from her report. When Ambassador Crix was explaining Centauri customs, 13 stood up and said that Centauri are weak because they prefer talking to fighting. He said their entire civilization exists only because stronger species allow it. Did Instructor Helen Parker try to stop him? She tried, sir, but when she told 13 to sit down and be respectful, He stood up to his full height and looked down at her. She is only 5 feet tall. 13 towered over her like a mountain. She had to call for security backup. Morrison put his head in his hands. Helen Parker was one of their best instructors. She had 20 years of experience teaching diplomatic relations. If 13 could intimidate her, no instructor was safe. There is more, sir, Collins continued. Ambassador Crix is threatening to file a formal complaint with the Galactic Council. He says allowing 13 to continue training here is an insult to all peaceful species. Before Morrison could respond, an emergency alarm started ringing. The ship's communication system crackled to life. All senior staff to Section C maintenance corridors immediately. We have a situation involving Cadet 13. Morrison and Collins ran through the ship's hallways. Other crew members were moving in the same direction. When they reached Section C, they found a crowd gathered around one of the narrow maintenance corridors. Security Chief Tom Brady was trying to calm down a small Nebulon cadet. The gaseous alien was flickering between bright yellow and deep purple colors. In Nebulan culture, these rapid color changes meant extreme terror. What happened here? Morrison asked Brady. Cadet Zix was performing routine maintenance checks when 13 cornered him in the corridor. Zix says 13 blocked both exits and started making threats. Morrison looked at the narrow corridor. It was barely 6 feet wide and 20 feet long. For a small Nebulon, being trapped in there with an angry Zephyrian would be like being locked in a cage with a wild animal. Where is 13 now? He left when he heard security coming. Claims he was just walking by and stopped to talk. Says Zix is lying about being threatened. Lieutenant Collins knelt down next to Zix. The small Nebulan was only 3 feet tall, and his gaseous body was still changing colors rapidly. Zix, can you tell us what 13 said to you? Zix's voice came through his translator as a whisper. He said small species like me should not be on warships, said I was taking up space that real warriors could use. Then he showed me his claws and asked if I wanted to see how sharp they were. Did he touch you? Morrison asked gently. No, sir. But he did not need to. His presence alone felt like being crushed. I could not move or speak until he left. Dr. Bell arrived with her medical kit. She scanned Zix with her instruments. His stress levels are off the charts. This kind of psychological trauma can cause permanent damage to Nebulon nervous systems. Morrison felt his anger building. 13 was not just bullying other cadets anymore. He was causing real mental harm that could last for years. The next morning, Captain Lisa Rodriguez called an emergency meeting. She was the ship's commanding officer, a tough woman who had served in 3 different wars. Her dark eyes showed the kind of anger that made even veteran soldiers nervous. Gentlemen and ladies, she said to the assembled senior staff, we have a crisis. I have received formal complaints from 4 different species representatives. The Centauri are threatening to withdraw all their cadets. The Vortax are considering the same. Even the Drakmars are concerned about 13's behavior. Morrison had never seen the captain this upset. What are our options, Captain? Limited. We cannot simply kick 13 out without causing a diplomatic incident with the Zephyrian government. But we also cannot let him continue terrorizing other cadets. What about stronger disciplinary measures? Collins suggested. We have tried everything, in the book. Confinement to quarters, extra duties, reduced privileges. Nothing works. His natural armor makes physical punishment ineffective, and psychological punishment just seems to make him angrier. Dr. Bell spoke up from her seat. Captain, I am concerned about the long-term effects on the other cadets. I am seeing signs of trauma, depression, and severe anxiety. Some are afraid to leave their quarters. Security Chief Brady nodded in agreement. My team is spending half their time responding to incidents involving 13. The other cadets do not feel safe anywhere on the ship. Captain Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars moved slowly past as the ship continued its training mission. I am going to contact Earth Command. This situation requires expertise we do not have. You think Earth Command can help? Morrison asked. Humans have dealt with bullies and aggressive species before. Maybe they have techniques we have not tried yet. Collins looked skeptical. With respect, Captain, what can humans do that we have not already attempted? 13 is physically superior to most human soldiers. Captain Rodriguez turned back to face the group. Lieutenant, human military history is full of examples where smaller, weaker forces defeated larger, stronger enemies. Maybe it is time we learned how they did it. After the meeting ended, Morrison returned to his office. He found another stack of incident reports waiting for him. All involved Cadet 13 in some way. As he read through them, one thing became clear. 13 was getting bolder and more aggressive every day. The situation was spiraling out of control. Soon someone was going to get seriously hurt or killed. Morrison hoped Earth Command had answers, because if they did not, the entire mixed species training program might collapse. In the ship's dining hall, 13 sat alone at a large table. Other cadets gave him a wide circle of empty space. He ate his meal slowly, his black eyes watching the other species with what looked like amusement. He had no idea that his reign of terror was about to face its greatest challenge. The transport ship arrived at the ISS horizon 3 days later. Captain Rodriguez stood in the docking bay waiting for Earth Command's response to their crisis. She expected to see a team of specialists or maybe some kind of special equipment. Instead, only one person walked off the transport. Sergeant Danny Wright looked completely ordinary. He was about 6 feet tall with brown hair and calm blue eyes. His uniform was clean but not fancy. He carried a single small bag and walked with quiet confidence. He did not look like someone who could solve their 13 problem. "Sergeant Wright?" Captain Rodriguez asked, trying to hide her disappointment. "Yes, ma'am. Reporting for duty." Wright's voice was steady and polite. He saluted properly but without any show-off movements. "Where's the rest of your team?" Wright smiled slightly. "Just me, Captain. Earth Command believes one person is enough for this situation." Rodriguez and Commander Morrison exchanged worried looks. Morrison stepped forward. "Sergeant, with respect, we are dealing with a very dangerous alien. Cadet 13 has injured multiple beings and terrorized our entire crew. Are you sure you understand what you are facing?" "I have read all the reports, Commander. 7 feet tall, natural armor, razor-sharp claws, extremely aggressive behavior. Zephyrian species, right? I know exactly what I'm dealing with." Lieutenant Collins joined the group. She looked right up and down with obvious doubt. "Sergeant, 13 has defeated security teams twice his size. What makes you think you can handle him alone?" Wright picked up his bag and slung it over his shoulder. "Ma'am, sometimes the best way to handle a bully is not with more force, but with the right kind of force applied correctly." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Wright asked simple questions about daily routines, training schedules, and 13's typical behavior patterns. He seemed more interested in when 13 ate meals and which routes he took through the ship than in his fighting abilities. "When does 13 usually cause the most trouble?" Wright asked. "During training sessions," Morrison replied. "Especially combat training and physical fitness. He seems to enjoy showing off his strength in front of other cadets." "And where does he spend his free time?" "Mostly in his quarters or the ship's gym. Sometimes he walks the corridors just to make other cadets move out of his way." Wright nodded thoughtfully. "What about his sleep schedule?" Collins found this question strange. "Why? Does that matter?" "Everything matters when you are trying to understand someone's behavior patterns." They reached the guest quarters where Wright would stay. As he set down his bag, the ship's alarm system announced the start of afternoon training sessions. "Perfect timing," Wright said. "Mind if I observe today's training?" Morrison led Wright to the observation deck above the main training hall. Below them, about 30 cadets from different species were practicing basic combat moves. 13 stood in the center like a mountain among hills. His massive form made even the largest Drakmar cadets look small. Instructor Helen Parker was trying to demonstrate proper defensive positions, but every time she called for volunteers, all the cadets would step back when they saw 13 watching them. "Cadet 13, Parker called out. "Please demonstrate the blocking technique we just learned." 13 clicked his mandibles in what Wright now recognized as Zephyrian laughter. "Instructor Parker, these techniques are for weak species. A real warrior attacks, not defends." The exercise requires following specific movements. Please cooperate. Looked around at the other cadets. They all stared at the floor to avoid eye contact. Fine, but I need a partner to block against. Parker looked around desperately. None of the other cadets would volunteer. Finally, she sighed. I will demonstrate. With you myself. No, Wright said quietly from the observation deck. Morrison looked at him in surprise. Sergeant? Wright was already heading for the door. Time for introductions. Before anyone could stop him, Wright walked down to the training hall. The room went completely silent as he entered. All the cadets turned to stare at this new human they had never seen before. Parker looked relieved to see another instructor. Can I help you? Sergeant Danny Wright, Earth Command. I am here to assist with training. Wright walked calmly toward the center of the room where 13 was standing. Looked down at Wright with obvious contempt. The size difference was dramatic. 13 towered over the human by more than a foot and probably weighed twice as much. Another, soft human, 13 said loudly enough for everyone to hear. What can you possibly teach us about combat? Wright stopped about 6 feet away from 13. His posture was relaxed, his hands empty and visible. He did not seem nervous or afraid at all. I am here to learn, actually. I have never seen Zephyrian combat techniques before. Would you mind showing me some moves? 13 was clearly surprised by this response. Most beings either challenged him or backed away in fear. This human was doing neither. You want me to demonstrate on you? 13 asked. If you do not mind. I promise to be a good student. 3 looked around. The room. All the other cadets were watching with wide eyes. Even the instructors on the observation deck were pressed against the windows. Human, I do not think you understand. Zephyrian combat is not gentle. I might hurt you badly. Wright smiled that same calm smile. I will take that risk. Unless you are afraid you might not be able to control your strength properly. This was a direct challenge to 13's pride. In Zephyrian culture, questioning someone's control was a serious insult. 13's mandibles clicked together rapidly in anger. Fine. But do not blame me when you end up in the medical bay. 13 moved into what Wright recognized as a standard Zephyrian attack position. His claws extended fully, and his armor plates shifted to protect vital areas. The other cadets backed away quickly, giving them a wide circle of empty space. Wright did not move into any recognizable fighting stance. He just stood there with his hands at his sides, still smiling slightly. Whenever you are ready, Cadet 13. 13 charged forward with a roar that echoed through the training hall. His claws aimed for Wright's chest, planning to pin the human against the wall behind him. What happened next took place so fast that most of the watching cadets missed it completely. Wright moved at the last possible second. Instead of backing away or trying to block 13's attack, he stepped forward and slightly to the side. His hands moved in 2 quick, precise motions. His charge continued past Wright, and he crashed into the wall with tremendous force. But instead of Wright being pinned there, 13 found himself face first against the metal, with his left arm twisted behind his back at an impossible angle. The training hall was completely silent, except for 13's heavy breathing. Interesting technique, Wright said conversationally as if he was discussing the weather. Very powerful, but it relies too much on forward momentum. What happens if your opponent is not where you expect them to be? Struggled against Wright's hold, but found he could not move at all. Every time he tried to use his strength, Wright would adjust his grip slightly and the pain in 13's twisted arm would increase. Let me go, 13 growled. Of course. Wright released his hold and stepped back. Thank you for the demonstration. Very educational. Spun around to face Wright, his black eyes full of rage and confusion. For the first time in his life, someone had controlled him completely without apparent effort. Wright looked around at the watching cadets. Who would like to try the next exercise? The training hall remained dead silent for several seconds. Every cadet stared at Wright with amazement. They had just watched someone handle Cadet 13 like he was a child throwing a tantrum. No one had ever seen anything like it. Rubbed his twisted arm and glared at Wright with pure hatred. His mandibles clicked together rapidly, which everyone knew meant extreme anger in Zephyrian body language. "You got lucky, human," 13 snarled. "That will not happen again." Wright looked genuinely interested in this response. "You think it was luck? Would you like to try again to make sure?" Before 13 could answer, Wright turned to address the entire group of watching cadets. What just happened here was not luck. It was the result of careful study and preparation. He walked to the center of the training area. All the cadets moved closer to hear what he had to say. Even 13, despite his anger, found himself listening. Humans have been part of the Galactic Alliance for 50 years now. Wright began. In that time, we have fought alongside many different species. We have also fought against some of them during various conflicts. Wright gestured toward a group of Drakmar cadets. We learned that Drakmars are incredibly strong and have natural weapons, but they overheat quickly during long fights. The Drakmar cadets looked at each other with surprise. They had never told anyone about their heat regulation problems. Wright pointed to the crystalline vortex. Vortex can become almost invisible and move silently, but bright lights cause them pain and confusion. The vortex made small ringing sounds of shock. This information was supposed to be secret. Centauri have excellent memory and can process information very quickly, but loud noises can overwhelm their sensitive hearing. The blue-skinned Centauri cadets stepped back nervously. Wright looked directly at 13. And Zephyrians are natural warriors with incredible strength and armor-like skin. But they have 3 major weaknesses that most people never notice. 13's black eyes narrowed dangerously. What weaknesses? First, your attack style relies on intimidation and overwhelming force. You expect your enemies to be afraid of you. When someone is not afraid, you do not know how to adapt. Wright began walking in a slow circle around 13. The massive alien turned to keep facing him, but Wright could see uncertainty in his movements now. Second, your natural armor is very strong, but it has joints that must remain flexible for movement. These joints are vulnerable to pressure if you know exactly where to apply it. Key unconsciously looked down at his arm joints, then forced himself to stop. Third, and most important, you have never learned to fight opponents who are smarter than you rather than stronger than you. This last statement hit 13 like a physical blow. His entire culture was based on strength and dominance. The idea that intelligence could be more dangerous than physical power was completely foreign to him. "Impossible," 13 said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Strength is everything. The strong survive and the weak perish. This is the natural law of the universe." Wright stopped walking and faced 13 directly. "Is it? Then explain how humans became one of the dominant species in the galaxy, despite being physically weaker than most aliens." The question hung in the air like a challenge. 13 had no good answer for it. Wright continued his explanation. "Humans do not win through superior strength or natural weapons. We win through observation, planning, and adaptation. We study our enemies until we understand them better than they understand themselves." Instructor Parker, who had been watching from the sidelines, stepped forward. "Sergeant Wright, are you saying that Earth Command has detailed information about the combat weaknesses of every allied species?" "Every species we have encountered, yes. It is not meant as a threat. It is simply how humans approach any potential conflict situation. We prepare for every possibility." The implications of this statement rippled through the crowd of cadets. If humans knew the weaknesses of every species, it meant they could potentially defeat anyone if they needed to, and was struggling to process this information. His entire worldview was built on the idea that physical strength determined who was superior. But here was a human who had defeated him without using any strength at all. "How?" 13 asked quietly. "How did you learn these things?" Wright's expression became more serious. "Cadet 13, humans have fought in over 200 conflicts since joining the galactic community. We have been allies and enemies with dozens of different species. Each time, we learned something new." He walked over to a wall display that showed human military history. "We fought alongside Zephyrian warriors during the Outer Rim conflicts 15 years ago. We observed how you fight, how you move, how you think during combat. They remembered hearing stories about those battles from older warriors. Humans had been considered useful but not particularly impressive fighters. You were watching us the whole time, 13 said, understanding beginning to dawn in his voice. We were learning from you, Wright corrected. Just like we learned from every other species, humans are not naturally strong or fast or tough, so we became naturally smart. Wright turned back to address all the cadets. This is why human military advisors are requested by so many different worlds. Not because we are great warriors ourselves, but because we can teach others how to be better warriors. A small Nebulan cadet raised his gaseous hand. But Sergeant Wright, if humans know how to defeat everyone, why do you not rule the galaxy? Wright smiled at the question. Because ruling through fear and strength never lasts very long. Someone stronger always comes along eventually. But if you earn respect through wisdom and fairness, that can last forever. He looked directly at 13 as he said this. Felt something he had never experienced before in his entire life. For the first time, he was truly afraid. Not afraid of being hurt physically, but afraid of being completely outmatched mentally. Wright had not just defeated him in combat. Wright had revealed that humans understood Zephyrians better than Zephyrians understood themselves. It was like discovering that someone had been reading his private thoughts for years. What happens now? 13 asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Wright considered the question carefully. Now you have a choice, Cadet 13. You can keep trying to rule through fear and intimidation, knowing that someone smarter will always find a way to stop you, or you can learn a different way to earn respect. Looked around the training hall. Every single cadet was staring at him with new eyes. They were no longer afraid. Instead, they looked curious to see what he would choose. For the first time in his life, 13 realized that being the strongest person in the room might not be the most important thing after all. I want to learn, he said quietly. Wright nodded, approvingly. Good. Class starts tomorrow morning. And 13, come ready to listen instead of fight. As the cadets filed out of the training hall, 13 remained behind. He stared at his reflection in the polished metal walls and wondered who he was, supposed to be now that strength alone was not enough. The change in Cadet 13 happened slowly over the next 2 weeks. At first, nobody believed it would last. The other cadets watched him carefully, waiting for him to return to his old bullying ways. But something fundamental had shifted inside, the massive Zephyrian. Wright had started special training sessions that focused on mental discipline rather than physical combat. He taught all the cadets about psychological warfare, strategic thinking, and the importance of understanding your opponent's mind, and attended every session. He sat in the back row, his huge frame folded awkwardly into a chair meant for smaller beings. He rarely spoke, but Wright could see him absorbing every word. Today we will discuss patience, Wright announced to the mixed group of cadets. Most species think patience is weakness. They want immediate results and quick victories. But humans learned long ago that patience is a weapon. A young Drakmar cadet raised her scaled hand. How can waiting be a weapon, Sergeant Wright? Wright smiled. Good question. Let me tell you about the Battle of Kepler Station. Human forces were outnumbered 10-1 by enemy ships. The enemy commander expected us to attack immediately because humans have a reputation for being aggressive. The cadets leaned forward to hear the story. Even 13 found himself interested despite trying to remain distant. Instead, the human commander waited. For 3 days, he did nothing while the enemy ships surrounded the station. The enemy got impatient. They started making mistakes, spreading their forces too thin, using up fuel, flying in aggressive patterns. Wright walked among the cadets as he spoke. On the 4th day, when the enemy was tired and disorganized, the humans struck. They won a complete victory with minimal losses. Spoke for the first time in days. The enemy defeated themselves through impatience. Exactly, Wright said, looking pleased that 13 was participating. Sometimes the best way to win is to let your opponent make the first mistake. After the class, 13 walked alone through the ship's corridors. Other cadets no longer pressed themselves against the walls when they saw him coming. Instead, they nodded politely and continued with their business. The change bothered 13 more than he expected. For his entire life, fear had been his currency. Other beings respected him because they were afraid of what he might do to them. Now that fear was gone and he was not sure what was left. In the dining hall, 13 sat at his usual table. But today, 3 Centauri cadets approached him hesitantly. "Excuse me, Cadet 13, said Pip. The small blue alien 13 had terrorized weeks earlier. "May we sit with you?" Stared at them in confusion. "Why would you want to sit with me?" "We heard you asking good questions in Sergeant Wright's class today. We thought maybe we could study together for tomorrow's tactical planning exam." The request was so unexpected that 13 did not know how to respond. He had never studied with anyone before. Zephyrian education was usually individual competition where the strongest students dominated the weaker ones. "I suppose that would be acceptable," 13 said awkwardly. As the Centauri cadets sat down, 13 realized something surprising. Without the constant need to intimidate and dominate, he could actually focus on learning. The tactical problems Wright assigned were like puzzles that required thinking rather than fighting. "How do you think Commander Zhang defeated the Vortex pirates with only 2 ships?" Pip asked, referring to one of Wright's case studies. Considered the question carefully. The pirates expected him to run away because he was outnumbered. Instead, he used their overconfidence against them. "That is what we thought too," agreed another Centauri. "But how did he coordinate his attack so perfectly?" "Patience," 13 said, remembering Wright's lesson. He waited until the pirates made a mistake, then exploited their weakness. The study session continued for over an hour. 13 found himself genuinely enjoying the mental challenge of analyzing different battle strategies. It was more satisfying than he had expected. Later that evening, Wright found 13 in the ship's observation lounge staring out at the stars. "How are you adjusting to the changes, Cadet?" Wright asked, sitting down nearby. It was quiet for a long moment. "I do not understand what is happening to me, Sergeant. For my entire life, I knew who I was. I was the strongest. Everyone feared me, so everyone respected me. Now you are discovering that there are different kinds of strength," Wright said gently. "The other cadets no longer fear me, but they still talk to me. Some even seem to like me. How is that possible?" Wright looked out at the stars. "Fear is not the same as respect, 13. Fear is temporary. As soon as someone stronger comes along, fear disappears. But respect based on wisdom, fairness, and genuine care for others can last a lifetime." 13 clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "In Zephyrian culture, we are taught that only the strong deserve to lead. The weak exist to serve the strong. What do you think about that now?" Thurs considered the question seriously. "I think maybe my culture is wrong about some things. Today I learned more from those small Centauri cadets than I ever learned from intimidating them." "That is a very mature observation. Sergeant Wright, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course. When you first arrived, were you afraid of me? Even a little?" Wright was honest in his answer. "No, 13, I was not afraid. But not because I thought you were weak. I was not afraid because I understood you." Turned to look at Wright directly. "What did you understand?" "I understood that. Underneath all that aggression and intimidation, you were just trying to find your place in the world. Every bully I have ever met was really just someone who felt lost and afraid." The truth of this statement hit 13 like a physical blow. He had been afraid. Afraid that if he was not the strongest, he would be nothing at all. "What am I supposed to be now?" 13 asked quietly. "Whatever you choose to be," Wright replied. "But I have a suggestion, if you are interested." "What suggestion?" "I think you would make an excellent leader. Not through fear, but through wisdom and protection of others. You have the intelligence to understand complex problems and the strength to defend those who cannot defend themselves." Sat in silence for several minutes processing this idea. Leadership through service rather than domination was completely foreign to everything he had been taught. "How do I learn to be that kind of leader?" Wright smiled. "The same way humans learn to be effective despite being physically weaker than most species, through patience, observation, and never stopping learning." The next morning, 13 arrived early to Wright's training session, but instead of sitting in the back row, he took a seat in the front. When other cadets entered, he helped them arrange their chairs and shared his notes from previous classes. Commander Morrison, watching from the observation deck, could hardly believe what he was seeing. The same alien who had terrorized his ship for months was now acting like a model cadet. "It is remarkable," Lieutenant Collins said, joining Morrison at the window. "I never thought we would see 13 change like this." "Wright did something none of us could do," Morrison replied. "He showed 13 that there was a better way to be strong." In the training room below, Wright began the day's lesson. "Today we will discuss leadership through service. True leaders do not rule through fear. They lead by making everyone around them better." 13 raised his hand to ask a question. For the first time in his life, he was eager to learn rather than eager to fight. The transformation was complete. The bully had become a student, and the student was on his way to becoming a true leader.